As we continue to explore motion capture control in After Effects, we soon come upon a couple of utility features that the program offers us that allow us to create what we would like to call organic motion. These two features are the Wiggler and Motion Sketch. So first things first, let's go ahead with this composition setup. I am simply going to drop a layer here with a rocket that we've been using in other videos, and I'm going to scale that down a little bit to about 40%. So my goal with this composition is to have the rocket fly across the screen on a path that I will define by moving my mouse around the screen. So to do so, I am going to place my rocket right here on this side, and I'm going to make it move up and down across the screen. With that done, what I want to do is I want to activate under window, the Motion Sketch utility. You'll notice that when I do that, a new utility opens up on the right-hand side with different properties that allow me to define how I want to capture my motion as I'm sketching it. The first one is at what speed do I want to capture my motion? Do I want to capture it real time, which is at 100%, or do I want to go slower or faster? So it actually determines the speed at which you capture what you're looking at as you move the mouse on the screen. The second one is smoothing. Smoothing will actually try to smooth out your motion on the screen. I prefer not to use this smoothing on the motion capture, on the motion sketch utility, because there is a smoothing utility that is a little bit more effective, in my opinion, which we will use to smooth out the actual path that we will be creating. Then you have the ability to turn on wireframing if you want to capture with wireframe only. And if you want to have your background as reference for whatever you have laid out on that composition, you can turn it on from here. So how does this work? Well, let's go ahead and click on Start Capture, and you'll notice that my mouse changes into that target, into that crosshairs target. That's basically saying you're about to start capturing. And when you capture this way, the program is waiting for you to actually click and start moving your mouse around. So what I'll do is I'm going to start on this side, and I'm going to click and start dragging my mouse around. As you can see, my time marker is moving on the screen, and as I drew with my mouse clicked, basically I start capturing the motion of my mouse. So let me do that again. Let me undo this. Start capture, go to this side, click and keep it clicked, start dragging, and move around until I capture the path. Now you'll notice that basically if I press the position property on my layer, if I click P on the keyboard, you'll notice that I have created a series of keyframes indicating the motion path that I followed with my mouse. So that motion is applied to the layer to which I am applying the motion sketch. Now, if I play this back, you'll notice that my rocket is moving across the screen, but it's very jerky. The motion is quite jerky. And the reason for that is because that's the speed at which my mouse is moving on the screen. I am moving, you're not very smooth with your mouse when you move things on the screen. This is the reason why we don't paint with the mouse when we're using Photoshop. So if I want to smooth this out a little bit, then I have options. The first one would have been to use the smoothing tool. Like I said, I don't like using that. I would like using a smoothing utility that comes under that same area. If I go Window, Smoother, if I open that up, this smoother allows me to change the tolerance value between the different frames. So right now this is set to 1 frame, to tolerance of 1. So let me select all the position keyframes by clicking on the label and applying that smoothing. And you see it basically got rid of most of the keyframes that I had creating a much smoother path. This is a good point to tell you that the least amount of keyframes you have in your animations, the smoother your animations will look, and the easier to debug in case something doesn't go according to plan. So having the least amount of keyframes is the goal when we're trying to create an animation. Now let me go ahead and play this back, and you see the motion of the path is smoother, but I still see some jerkiness, not necessarily on the path, but now the jerkiness is in the timing. So sometimes my rocket goes faster, sometimes it goes slower. And the reason for that is because I don't have a constant linear motion for my mouse. I didn't move it linearly. I was moving it faster in some points and slower in others. So the motion sketch did what it was supposed to do. It actually captured that motion. So the goal now is to actually even out this motion so that we make it almost linear, and that way we can start accelerating and decelerating where we want to. In my case, I just want to simply make it linear. So how do I make that motion linear? Well, we talked about interpolation a while back, a couple modules ago. So remember, to access the interpolation of keyframes, what we want to do is we want to right click on one of them, and from the flyout menu, you see keyframe interpolation as an option. So when I click on that, we have three options under interpolation. The first one is temporal interpolation, which affects properties that change over time, such as this one, position. Spatial interpolation affects those things that change the shape of a path, like what we're working on right now. So you want to change, if you want to change the settings on these Bezier points, right now we have them as continuous Bezier because that is the default format that Motion Sketch gives me. But if I click on that drop-down menu, I see other options as well. I can click Auto Bezier, Linear Bezier, and so on. So if I click Linear, for example, and click OK, you'll notice that the shape of the actual path changed. And that is not the intent. We don't want to change that shape of the path. I want to maintain the curves. So I want to do Control Z. So where can I get access to something inside interpolation that actually allows me to create that that smoothness of time, so that my ship moves sort of at the same speed across all these frames? Well, that's where roving comes in. Roving basically looks at all of the keyframes, calculates the amount of time that it takes to get from one point to the other, and then organizes your keyframes in the timeline so that they space out so that the animation result be linear. So you can either lock them to time to keep them where they are, or you can rove across time and let the program do its thing to place them, distance them differently than what the program Sketch gave you. So if I go the sketching utility gave you. So if I click OK, pay attention to the keyframes on the timeline. I'm going to click OK. Notice that they all change position. You will notice that now my tween frames are all equidistant, meaning that my motion is linear, and the shape of the frames changed from the rhombuses, from the diamonds to circles. So now when I play this back, my motion is smooth across the screen between frames. So it becomes linear. Now I can control this at this point, and if I want to accelerate or decelerate at my control, I can go back and select the keyframe that I want to affect, right click it, and then I can start adding ECs in, ECs out as necessary, or change the interpolation value for it to something else. So I have access to those things. Now, talking about interpolation, let's talk about these things for just a second. Linear, as you see, is what I have right now. The motion timing between my keyframes is equidistant, meaning the motion is constant, almost mechanical. Bezier allows you to control via the handles. Continuous Bezier is maintaining the same relationship between the different frames so as to create a smooth curve. Auto Bezier is when you actually when you let the program decide for you how the direction of those handles will be. Hold will retain the values of one frame and maintain them until the next frame comes on. So if you want to freeze something on the screen, you could apply an interpolation value of hold, and that value will hold without changes until the next keyframe comes on, or the next change on the keyframe sequence. So let me cancel out of this really quick. And what I want to show you now is that the rocket is moving, but I want to make it move following the path. So from the previous video, you remember that you can always go into into Layer, Transform, Auto Orient, Control Alt O. And so if I click Auto Orient on this and click OK, you will notice that now my rocket follows the shape of the path, except my rocket is pointing upwards. I would like my rocket to actually follow the path as if it was moving in that direction. But as you saw in the previous video, when I did that, if I select the rocket layer and I press the R key on the keyboard to call its rotation property, you notice that this is auto following the path through an algorithm. So I told the program to auto rotate, but I didn't tell it use the rotation property of the layer. Therefore, I don't have any rotation values on that layer that have been set up. Therefore, I can go ahead and use the rotation property to my convenience. In this case, I want to make that rocket 90 degrees to the right. So I enter a value of 90 degrees. And when I play this back, my rocket is now following the path. So as you can see, this gives you a lot of flexibility in the way you can organically sketch different things on the screen by using your mouse or by using your Wacom tablet if you have one. That is the Wiggler. The other utility that we're going to talk about in this video is I'm sorry, that was the motion sketcher. The next utility we're going to be talking about is the wiggler. So let me go ahead and drop in another rocket layer here. I'm going to turn off the previous layer, and I'm going to be working on this one now. So, and I'm going to hide this so that it's not on the way. And so in this layer, I am going to scale it down. Actually, I'm going to keep it as is so that you guys can clearly see what the wiggler does. The wiggler is a fairly easy utility to use. If you want to create motion that is random, sort of making something shake, kind of like a grunge kind of feel, organically, just letting the computer determine what it does, you just need two things. You need to have a couple of keyframes for position change and the wiggler utility. So I'm going to place this rocket here. I'm going to give it a position value here for that, whatever it is. Then I'm going to go to the 5-second mark, and I am going to simply move it 1 pixel on the x-axis. So from 640, I'm going to go to 641. Only 1 pixel. That's all I'm changing. And so I am actually also going to change it on the x-axis to 361. So I literally just moved it down 1 pixel to the right and to the bottom. And it's basically undetectable. But there is a change between those two keyframes. Now, you don't have to change it 1 pixel. You actually, all you need is 2 keyframes. That's all you need. It could be the exact same values. And so what you want to do is you want to go ahead and with the 2 keyframes selected, go to the window, drop-down menu, open up the wiggler. You see that the wiggler opens with different properties. Now, the wiggler is going to tell you how do you want to wiggle this artwork. And it's going to say, do you want to create a spatial path or a temporal path, depending on what you're working on. Since we're changing the position of something, we're going to use a spatial path. Then it gives you the ability to say, do you want the wiggle to be smooth or jerky? So I'm going to use jagged. I'm going to use that option. I want this to be that you actually see the thing wiggling, but you can make it such a smooth wiggle that it almost looks like it's rocking back and forward by using the smooth one. Now you can say, I want to move only on the x-axis, only on the y-axis, all in the same amount, or all independently. Now, if you want to move something sideways, left to right, that would be X. If you want to move it up and down, that would be Y. All in the same would be, if you move to the right, this would move up. If it moves to the left, it would move to the bottom. That's basically the same. That's the way that would work. And then all independent, it's the program will decide for you. So that's what I want. I want all independent. The frequency is how many wiggles do you want per second. So I want to have this to be really dramatic. So I want to say I want 20 wiggles per second, and I want a magnitude of what's the value in pixels that you want this to move from where you're starting. So this could move with magnitude 1 pixel to the left or to the right, or 1 pixel up or down. Let's say I want this to be dramatic. So I want to make this say 20 pixels. And when I apply this, you'll notice that I get a set of keyframes that goes across the entirety of the layer. Each frame has its own value of position. And when I play this back, watch what happens. Basically, the thing is shaking all over the place. If I apply motion blur to this, then it's looking like there's an earthquake going on. Okay, so that is what the wiggler does for you. The wiggler allows you to shake things like that, whether you want to have it on the X or on the Y, or both at the same time independently, is your choice. But this gives you the ability to create that kind of natural motion. And once you apply motion blur, it actually looks fairly natural. It almost looks like there's an earthquake going on, and in this case, and it gives you that flexibility, gives you that organic feel for those animations without having to go frame by frame trying to figure out how to animate something.